My name is Rose Washington, and I'm 72 years old. For 35 years, I taught mathematics at Lincoln High School in rural Georgia, where my husband James and I built our life together. I never imagined I'd be telling this story, but what happened at James's funeral changed everything I thought I knew about our 48 years of marriage. I remember that morning like it was yesterday, though it's been 18 months now. The autumn air was crisp, leaves crunching under my feet as I walked into Cedar Grove Baptist Church. The same church where James and I had exchanged vows, where we'd baptized our children, where we'd celebrated every milestone. But that day, the familiar wooden pews felt different, harder, colder. Before I continue, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, please like and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing more. The funeral service was everything James would have wanted. Dignified, traditional, filled with the gospel music he loved. Our 3 children sat beside me in the front row. Michael, our eldest, a successful attorney, Sarah, our middle child, who followed my footsteps into teaching, and David, our youngest, who'd taken over James's construction business. I kept my composure as the choir sang. His Eye is on the Sparrow, James's favorite hymn. The rich voices filled the church, but something felt off. I couldn't place it then, but now I know my instincts were trying to warn me. After the service, as people filed past the casket to pay their final respects, our family friend Pastor Richardson handed me an envelope. "Someone left this for you," he whispered, his weathered face betraying concern. "They said it was urgent." The envelope felt heavy in my trembling hands. Addressed simply to Rose, I waited until I was alone in the church office to open it. The paper inside held just 7 words, written in handwriting I'd know anywhere. James's handwriting: "I am still alive. Trust no one." My legs gave out, and I sank into the nearest chair. The program from the funeral slipped from my lap, landing face up on the floor. James's smiling photo stared back at me, and suddenly every detail from the past 2 weeks started shifting like pieces of a broken kaleidoscope. The heart attack while he was alone at our lake house, the closed casket that our children had insisted upon, the way Michael had handled all the arrangements, barely letting me make any decisions. But there was something else, something that made my blood run cold. 3 days before James's death, he'd tried to tell me something. We were in our garden, tending to his prized tomatoes, when he'd grabbed my hand. "Rose," he'd said, his voice urgent, "if anything happens to me..." But Michael had interrupted, appearing suddenly at the back door, and James had gone quiet. "What would you have done if your husband tried to warn you about something but never got the chance to finish?" I tucked the note into my Bible and walked back into the sanctuary, my heart pounding against my ribs. The church was nearly empty now, just my children gathering their things. Sarah was wiping her eyes. David was speaking softly with the funeral director. And Michael was watching me. There was something in his gaze I'd never noticed before, something calculating. As I looked at my firstborn son, a memory surfaced. James's company had recently won a major contract, one that would have made the business worth millions. A contract that now, with James gone, would fall under Michael's control as executor of the estate. But the question that kept echoing in my mind wasn't about money or contracts. It was simpler and more terrifying. If James was alive, who was in that casket? That night, I couldn't sleep. The house James and I had shared for 4 decades felt like a stranger's home. Every creak and settling sound made me flinch. I sat in our bedroom, surrounded by his things. His reading glasses still on the nightstand, his slippers by the bed, his favorite cardigan hanging on the door hook. The familiar scent of his aftershave still lingered on his pillow. If you're following my story, drop a heart emoji in the comments. I need to know I'm not alone in this. I pulled out the note again, studying James's handwriting under the dim bedside lamp. Each loop and curve was unmistakably his. The way he always made his O's look like O's. The slight slant to his T's. My hands shook as I remembered the last time I'd seen his handwriting, on a grocery list still stuck to our refrigerator door. "Don't forget coffee filter." A soft knock at my door made me jump. "Mama?" It was Sarah. "I brought you some tea." I quickly slipped the note under my pillow as she entered. My daughter's eyes were red-rimmed, her normally neat hair disheveled. She set the tea on my nightstand and sat beside me, taking my hand in hers. "You should try to rest," she said softly. But there was something in her voice, a slight tremor that didn't match her concerned expression. Sarah had always been terrible at hiding things from me. 20 years of teaching had given me a sixth sense for when someone wasn't telling the whole truth. "Sarah," I said, squeezing her hand, "is there something you need to tell me?" She stiffened almost imperceptibly. "What do you mean, Mama?" "About your father, about what happened at the lake house." The ceiling fan cast rotating shadows across her face as she pulled her hand away. "Michael said we shouldn't." She stopped herself, standing abruptly. "I should let you rest." "Michael said what?" I pressed, but she was already at the door. "Good night, Mama. Try to sleep." The door clicked shut behind her, leaving me with more questions than answers. I waited an hour, listening to the house settle into nighttime silence, before I made my move. James and I had always kept important documents in his study. If there were answers, they'd be there. I crept down the hallway, my house shoes silent on the carpet. The study door was closed. Strange, since I'd left it open earlier. As I reached for the handle, I heard voices from inside. Michael and David, speaking in harsh whispers. "She has to suspect something," David was saying. "We can't keep this up forever." "We don't need forever," Michael replied. "Just long enough to get everything transferred. Once the paperwork goes through next week." "This isn't right, Michael. Dad's not here anymore," as Michael's tone made my skin crawl. "Unless you want to explain to the feds about those contracts you helped him with." I pressed my hand against my mouth to stifle a gasp. David's silence spoke volumes. "That's what I thought," Michael continued. "Just stick to the plan." Rose. It felt strange hearing him call me by my first name. She'll accept it eventually. She has to. I backed away from the door, my heart thundering in my chest. My youngest son's words echoed in my head. "This isn't right. What contracts? What were they hiding?" Back in my room, I pulled out my phone, hands trembling as I opened an banking app. James and I had always kept separate accounts alongside our joint one, something his mother had insisted on when we first married. "A woman should always have her own money," she'd said. Thank God I'd listened. The joint account was empty. Do you think I should have confronted my sons right then and there? I sat in the darkness, watching headlights from passing cars create moving patterns on my ceiling. Each sweep of light reminded me of the lake house security camera. James had installed them himself last summer, proud of figuring out the high-tech gadgets, as he called them. The footage would show what really happened that day. If he was alive, that's where the answers would be. But Michael had the keys to the lake house now, or so he thought. What he didn't know was that James and I had always kept spare keys in a tackle box, buried beside the old oak tree at the edge of our property. James's paranoia about losing keys during fishing trips had finally come in handy. I waited until 3 a.m., when the house was completely silent. Dressed in dark clothes, I slipped out through the back door, using my phone's flashlight to guide me to the oak tree. The ground was soft from recent rain, making it easy to dig up the plastic box. Inside, wrapped in a plastic bag, was the key that might lead me to the truth. As I straightened up, movement caught my eye near the garden shed, a shadow where there shouldn't be one. Then the beam of a flashlight cut through the darkness, and a familiar voice called out, "Looking for something, Mama?" The flashlight beam blinded me, but I recognized David's voice. My youngest son stepped forward, his face half hidden in shadow. Behind him, I could make out another figure. "Sarah, before I share what happened next, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. This story gets even more intense, and you won't want to miss what's coming." "I had a feeling you'd try something like this," David said, lowering the flashlight. His voice was gentle, nothing like the whispered argument I'd overheard earlier. Sarah moved closer, and I noticed she was carrying a duffel bag. "Mama," she said, "we need to move fast. Michael has people watching the lake house." My mind struggled to process her words. You're helping me?" David glanced over his shoulder at the dark house. "We don't have much time. Michael's meeting with the board tomorrow morning to transfer everything into his name. Once that happens..." He let the sentence hang in the air. Sarah pressed a burner phone into my hand. "Dad gave this to me 3 weeks ago. Said if anything happened to him, I should make sure you got it. There's only one number programmed in it." My fingers trembled as I flipped open the basic phone. "One contact. Trust. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, my voice cracking. Michael was watching us too closely. David explained. He has the house wired, cameras, microphones. That's why we had to meet you out here. The reality of my situation hit me like a physical blow. My own son had turned our home into a surveillance prison. But why? What could be worth betraying his own family?
If you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me keep bringing you more amazing love stories. Alright, back to the story.
But as federal agents burst through the door, I saw Michael's hand move toward his jacket one last time. James saw it too. Michael, don't, I started to say. The next few seconds would change our family forever. Time slowed to a crawl as Michael's hand moved toward his jacket, but before anyone could react, a flash of movement caught my eye. Through the farmhouse window, I spotted another figure in the darkness. A woman, her silhouette hauntingly familiar. Before you hear what happened next, make sure to like and subscribe. This story takes a turn nobody saw coming. The woman raised something that glinted in the moonlight. 2 shots rang out simultaneously. Michael stumbled backward, blood blooming on his shoulder. James dropped to the floor beside me, clutching his arm. FBI, freeze. Agents swarmed the room, but the woman had vanished. Sarah rushed to James while David helped me up. Michael lay on the ground, his unfired gun beside him. As medics rushed in, "It's just a graze," James grunted, letting Sarah examine his arm. "But that shooter, Rose, did you see her?" I nodded, my throat tight. "It looked like, but it couldn't be." "Catherine," David finished, his face pale. "Aunt Catherine, my sister. The one person I'd trusted with everything since we were children. The one who'd helped Michael set up his first business accounts. The one who'd been oddly calm at the funeral." "There's more," David said, pulling a phone from his pocket. "Look what I found in Michael's documents." He pulled up a series of photos, shipping manifests, bank transfers, all bearing 2 signatures, Michael's and Catherine. "The weapons were just part of it," Sarah added, her voice shaking. "They're calling it the harvest, using construction sites to move people, not just guns. And Aunt Catherine, she's been running it for years." James's face hard. "That's why she pushed Michael into the business straight out of college. She needed someone on the inside." An FBI agent approached, holding an evidence bag. Inside was a single pearl earring, found where the shooter had stood. I recognized it. I'd given Catherine that set for her 50th birthday. "Mrs. Washington," the agent said, "we need to talk about your sister." But something else was nagging at me. The way Catherine had taken the shot, not to kill, just to wound. The same way she'd taught me to shoot when we were girls, practicing on our daddy's farm. "Wound to warn," she'd always said. "Kill to end." This wasn't an attempt to silence us. It was a message. What would you do if you discovered your own sister was sending you deadly warning? Michael was handcuffed and led away, but his eyes never left mine. There was something there, not just guilt or anger, but fear. He'd gotten in too deep, realized too late what he'd helped create. "The business records," James said suddenly. "The ones Catherine kept in that old hope chest of your mama's. Did anyone ever find them?" My blood ran cold. The hope chest, Mama's prized possession, passed down to Catherine as the eldest daughter, the one Catherine had insisted on keeping in her basement office at the construction company. "David," I said, "who has access to the company office now? Everyone's locked out except..." His face went white. "Except the board members. And Catherine's still listed as senior financial advisor." James grabbed his phone, dialing rapidly. "We need a team at Washington Construction now. The evidence isn't in offshore accounts or shipping manifests. It's all been right under our noses, in a hope chest in the basement." But I knew my sister. If she'd kept evidence this long, it wasn't carelessness. It was insurance. And now she was calling it in. "She'll have copies," I said. "Hidden somewhere only I would know to look." Sarah touched my arm. "Mama, what are you saying?" "I'm saying your Aunt Catherine just fired 2 warning shots, one for your father, one for Michael. She's telling me I have a choice to make." James's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Remember the treehouse, little sister? Time to play hide and seek again." The treehouse, where Catherine and I had hidden our childhood secrets, where we'd made blood sister pacts and promised to always protect each other. Rose, James started, but I cut him off. I know where she'll be. I looked at the FBI agents, but this time I go alone. Outside, dawn was breaking over the Georgia pines. Somewhere in those trees, my sister was waiting, and I had until sunset to decide. Family loyalty or justice. The game wasn't over. It was evolving. The old treehouse stood exactly as I remembered it, weathered boards silhouetted against the morning sky. It sat on the edge of our family's original property, now overgrown and wild, forgotten by everyone except those who knew its secrets. If you're following this story, drop a heart in the comments. The truth about my sister is about to change everything. My hands trembled as I climbed the familiar rungs nailed into the oak's massive trunk. Each step brought back memories. Catherine teaching me to braid my hair, sharing stolen cookies, whispering secrets in the dark. How had my sister gone from that little girl to someone who could orchestrate such darkness? The trapdoor creaked as I pushed it open. Catherine sat cross-legged in the corner, looking eerily like she had 40 years ago. Same straight spine, same calculating eyes. The pearl earrings match still gleamed at her throat. "You came alone," she said. Not a question. "You knew I stayed by the trapdoor, watching her carefully. The limp signal. How many people in town are part of this, Catherine?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Enough. Did you ever wonder why Daddy left the construction company to James instead of his own daughter? Why Mama insisted we keep separate bank accounts from our husbands?" "They were protecting us," I said. "They were protecting their investment." Catherine's voice hardened. "The Washington family has been moving things through this county since before the Civil War. Construction was just a cover. But Daddy didn't trust his girls to handle the real business." My mind raced through childhood memories. Daddy's late-night meetings, Mama's careful accounting in her little red book, the way certain trucks only came through after dark. "So you used Michael," I said. "Your own nephew. I gave him an opportunity, just like I'm giving you one now." She reached into her jacket, pulling out a small red notebook. Mama's handwriting filled its pages. "Everything's in here. Names, dates, account enough to bring down half the state's politicians and most of its wealthy families. Those weapons shipments, the human trafficking, small pieces of a bigger machine," Catherine cut in. "One that's been running longer than either of us has been alive. Why do you think this town never suffered during recessions? Why our schools always had funding while others closed?" "Blood money," I whispered. "Family money," she corrected. "And now you have a choice. Join us. Help manage things the right way, or," she gestured vaguely. "Well, accidents happen, even to retired math teachers and their reformed husbands." A floorboard creaked behind me. I spun to see Thomas, Michael's accountant, climbing through the trapdoor. His signature limp was gone. The limp was fake, I realized. A way to identify each other. "Smart girl," Catherine smiled. "Always were better at patterns than me. It's why we need you. The operation's growing, Rose. Going digital. We need someone who can spot irregularities, keep the numbers clean, like Michael was supposed to do." Michael got started skimming, drawing attention. "That's not how we operate." She stood, brushing dust from her pants. "You have until sunset to decide. The book stays with me. Until then. And if I refuse," Catherine's eyes softened with what looked like genuine sadness. "Remember when we were little? And I promised I'd always protect you. That hasn't changed, but I can't protect you from this if you stand against it." Thomas moved closer, something shifting in his stance that made my skin crawl. Catherine must have seen my fear. "Still time to play hide and seek, little sister," she said softly. "But this time, don't get found." A phone buzzed. Thomas's. He checked it, then whispered something to Catherine. Her face changed. "FBI's moving on the construction office," Thomas reported. "They found the hope chest. Empty," Catherine said calmly. "Like always." She turned to me. "Last chance, Rose. Walk away now. Pretend you never saw this book. Live your quiet life with James. And if I don't, then the next time I shoot," she said, "I won't aim to wound." I looked at my sister. Really looked at her. Behind the polished exterior, I saw something broken, something that had shattered long ago when Daddy passed her over for the company. "You're right about one thing," I said quietly. "I am good with patterns." I reached into my pocket, pulling out my phone. Good enough to know that every third Tuesday unmarked trucks leave the construction yard at midnight. Good enough to spot the pattern in missing persons reports that follow those trucks, and good enough to have recorded this entire conversation. Catherine's composure cracked. Thomas reached for his weapon, but another voice rang out. FBI. Hands where we can see them. Agents swarmed up through the trapdoor, through the treehouse window, seemingly from every direction. Sarah and David appeared behind them, both wearing FBI vests. My children, I told Catherine as she was handcuffed, figured out your pattern too. They've been working undercover for months. The red notebook fell from Catherine's hands. As an agent picked it up, I saw what I'd suspected. Blank pages. The real evidence was already in FBI hands, documented through months of surveillance. Hide and seek's over, sis, I said softly. But as they led her away, Catherine turned back with a smile that chilled my blood. Is it, Rose? Ask yourself. If Daddy built all this, if Mama kept those books, who else was involved? How far back does it really go? She disappeared down the tree, leaving me with a question that would lead to an even darker truth. Catherine's words echoed in my mind as I sat in our family kitchen that evening, surrounded by old photo albums. James paced by the window, his arm in a sling, while Sarah and David spread files across the table. Before I reveal what we discovered in those albums, please subscribe if you haven't already. What happens next changed everything we thought we knew about our family. Look at this, Sarah said, pointing to a faded photograph. It showed our parents at a garden party in 1965, standing with several prominent families from the county. Every person in this photo either owned a construction company or was involved in state transportation. David pulled out another photo. And here's Grandpa with the same group 10 years earlier. The families changed, but the positions remained the same, like they were passing down more than just businesses. I studied the faces in the photographs, remembering Catherine's words about our family's history. The Washington name had always carried weight in Georgia, but I'd attributed that to Daddy's hard work and honest reputation. Now, looking closer at these images, I noticed details I'd missed before. The jewelry, I whispered, reaching for my magnifying glass. In every photo, the women wore similar pearl necklaces. The men all had the same style of signet ring, not identical pieces, but variations on a theme, a pattern. It's not just a business network, James said quietly. It's a society. My phone buzzed. A message from the FBI agent handling Catherine's case. Your sister's asking for you, says there's something you need to see. What would you do if the truth about your family legacy threatened everything you believed in? At the detention center, Catherine sat calmly in her orange jumpsuit. Those same pearls somehow still at her throat. They'd allowed her to keep them after she'd proven they were just pearls. Nothing hidden inside. No secret compartment. I knew you'd figure it out eventually, she said as I sat down. You always loved puzzles. The society, I said. How deep does it go? She leaned forward, lowering her voice. Remember Mama's rose garden? How she'd spend hours out there tending those bushes? Did you ever wonder why she planted them in that specific pattern? My heart skipped. Mama's roses. 13 bushes arranged in a seemingly random layout. But if you looked at them from the upstairs window, coordinates, I breathed. Catherine nodded. 13 locations across 3 states. Transfer points, safe houses, storage facilities, all hidden in plain sight, passed down through generations of wives and daughters. The men ran the businesses, but the women, we were the keepers of the real secrets. Why are you telling me this now? Because in 3 days, something big is happening, something even I couldn't stop. She slid a folded paper across the table. These are the real coordinates. Whatever you find, remember, some secrets are kept for a reason. Back home, James and I spread out an old map on his study floor. As I marked the coordinates, a pattern emerged. Not random points, but a perfect circle around a central location. The old courthouse, James said, tapping the center point. The one they're demolishing next week. Sarah burst into the room, her face pale. Mama, David found something in the construction company's basement. Behind the hope chest, there was a hidden room. The hidden room contained decades of ledgers, each filled with Mama's careful handwriting. But these weren't just accounting books. They were records of every transaction, every shipment, every name in the society's history. Look at the dates, David said, pointing to the earliest entries. These go back to 1866, right after the Civil War. The pieces started falling into place. The construction companies, the transportation networks, the society. It had all started during Reconstruction, when certain families found ways to maintain power and wealth through carefully controlled channels. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Catherine. Time's running out, little sister. Some doors shouldn't be opened. But as I studied the ledgers more closely, I noticed something odd. Certain entries were marked with a small rose symbol, the same pattern as Mama's gardens. These aren't just records, I realized. They're a map, not to where things were moved, but to where something is hidden, something valuable enough to protect for over 150 years. James looked up from his own research. The courthouse demolition. It's being handled by one of the society's companies, the same one that's been renovating historical buildings across the state. They're not renovating, Sarah said quietly. They're searching. A heavy knock at the door made us all jump. Through the window, I saw several black SUVs parked outside. Men in suits stood on our porch. Their stance, military precise. Mrs. Washington? A voice called. This is Agent Phillips, FBI Special Division. We need to talk about your mother's roses. I met James's eyes, seeing my own fear reflected there. The game had changed again. This wasn't just about Catherine or Michael anymore. We'd stumbled onto something older, something bigger than our family drama. The question was, would exposing the truth protect us, or make us the next target? I opened the door to find 5 FBI agents on my porch, but something about them felt off. Their badges looked genuine, but their eyes held the same calculating look I'd seen in Catherine's. If you've been following this story, you won't believe what happens next. Hit subscribe to make sure you don't miss the final chapters. Mrs. Washington, Agent Phillips said, we need access to your mother's property records. Specifically, the garden blueprints. James appeared beside me, his good arm protectively around my shoulders. You have a warrant? Phillips smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We don't need one. Not for this. He rolled up his sleeve slightly, revealing a familiar signet ring. We're here on behalf of the council. The council. Catherine had mentioned that name in one of Mama's ledgers, a governing body that had overseen the society since its inception. You're not FBI, Sarah said from behind us. She had her phone out, texting rapidly. Oh, we are, Phillips replied. But we're something else too. Something old. Mrs. Washington, your sister wasn't supposed to tell you about the roses. That information is privileged, passed only from mother to eldest daughter. Then why did Mama tell me? I challenged. Why show me the pattern from the upstairs window? Because Evelyn Washington broke protocol. Another agent said. Just like your sister did. Just like you're doing now. The name hit me like a physical blow. No one had called Mama Evelyn in years. She'd always been May to everyone in town. Evelyn was the name in the oldest ledger. She wasn't named after my grandmother, I whispered. She was my grandmother. Phillips nodded. Your mother, the woman you knew as May, was chosen to protect the legacy. When she couldn't have daughters of her own, she adopted. You and Catherine were selected, not random orphans. The world tilted beneath my feet. James's arm tightened around me. The courthouse, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. What's hidden there? Mrs. Washington, please. Philip stepped forward. Don't make this difficult. The blueprints, now. David's voice cut through the tension. Too late. He held up his phone. Real FBI is 2 minutes out, with a real warrant. Phillips's face hardened. You don't understand what you're interfering with. This goes beyond your family. Beyond George. What's buried under that courthouse has protected Southern interest for generations. Protected. Sarah's voice dripped with disgust. You mean controlled. Through weapons, trafficking, corruption. Through necessary means, Phillips corrected. The war never really ended, Mrs. Washington. It just changed forms. Sirens wailed in the distance. Phillips glanced at his watch. 24 hours, he said. Bring the blueprints to the old courthouse at midnight tomorrow, or Catherine won't be your only family member in custody. They left as smoothly as they'd arrived, just as real FBI vehicles turned onto our street. Inside, I rushed to the study, pulling out Mama's ledgers. Look at the names, I said. flipping pages frantically. Every woman listed here, they're all the same person. Different generations, same name recycled. A legacy passed down, James murmured. But why? Because of what they're protecting. I pulled out the coordinate map. These aren't just transfer points. They're part of a ritual. The society doesn't just move goods. They're guardians of something. Sarah leaned over the map. The courthouse is the center point. Everything flows toward it. Or from it, David added. Look at the dates of major shipments. They all coincide with lunar cycle. My phone buzzed. A text from Catherine. Midnight. Full moon. The roses know. I ran outside to Mama's garden, James and the kids following. Under the rising moon, I finally saw what she'd tried to show me years ago. The rose bushes weren't just coordinates. They were a cloud. And tomorrow night, they would align perfectly with the courthouse tower. They're not just looking for something, I realized. They're trying to stop something from happening. Something that occurs every 100 years. And James picked up one of Mama's old gardening tools. A trowel with strange markings on the handle. Rose, he said slowly. These aren't just tools, they're keys. In the distance, the courthouse clock began to toll. We had 24 hours to uncover a century-old secret, outwit a powerful society, and prevent whatever ritual they were planning. But first, I needed answers from the one person who knew the whole truth. It was time to visit Mama's grave. The cemetery was silent under the waxing moon as I stood before Mama's grave, the gardening trowel clutched in my hands. James kept watch at the gates while Sarah and David searched nearby headstones for matching symbols. If you've made it this far, you won't want to miss how all these pieces finally connect. Make sure to like and subscribe. Look at this, Sarah called softly, waving her flashlight over a weathered tombstone. The name had long since faded, but there it was, the same rose pattern etched into the marble. Elizabeth Washington, 1866. David read, brushing away decades of moss. The first keeper. I studied Mama's headstone more carefully now, remembering how she'd insisted on designing it herself. The dates seemed normal at first glance, 1945-2020, but as I traced the numbers with my finger, I felt subtle grooves beneath them. It's a code, I whispered. Using the trowel's handle, I pressed each number in sequence. The ground beneath us trembled slightly, and a small compartment in the headstone's base clicked open. Inside lay a single leather-bound journal, its pages yellow with age. The handwriting inside shifted between different styles, as if written by multiple people, or by the same person trying to disguise their hand. Listen to this, I said, reading aloud. The power must be contained. Each 100 years, the alignment threatens to break the seal. The society was formed not to protect our wealth, but to protect the world from what our greed awakened. What does that mean? Sarah asked. Before I could answer, headlights swept across the cemetery. A black SUV parked beside James's truck. Rose, Catherine's voice called out. I hoped you'd figure it out. My sister emerged from the shadows, flanked by 2 guards. She'd traded her prison jumpsuit for a familiar pearl necklace and dark suit. You were never really in custody, I realized. The council arranged my release, she confirmed. They need all living keepers present for tonight's ritual, even the ones who broke protocol. David stepped forward protectively, but Catherine raised her hand. I'm not here to stop you, she said. I'm here to help. Because what's buried under that courthouse? It's waking up. She pulled out her own journal, newer but filled with the same shifting handwriting. During the Civil War, she explained, certain families discovered something in an ancient burial mound. Something powerful. They thought they could control it, use it to change the tide of war, but it was too strong. The society wasn't formed to protect power, I said, understanding finally dawning. It was formed to contain it. Catherine nodded. The courthouse was built as a seal, the 13 points around it. She gestured to our map. Channel energy to keep it dormant. But every 100 years when the moon aligns perfectly, the seal weakens. Sarah finished. Phillips and his people, Catherine continued. They think they can harness it this time. Use it. They don't understand. No one can control this power. It must stay buried. A distant explosion made us all jump. Through the trees we could see smoke rising from downtown. They've started early, Catherine said urgently. The demolition wasn't scheduled until midnight, but they're breaking through now. James joined us, his face grim. Police scanners going crazy. They're evacuating downtown due to structural concerns with the courthouse. I looked at my sister, really looked at her. Behind the polished exterior, I saw the scared girl who'd protected me all those years ago. What do we need to do? I asked. The ritual requires all living keepers, she said, but not to break the seal, to reinforce it. That's what the roses mean. They're not coordinates, they're focusing points for the containment spell. Spell? David scoffed. This is crazy. Crazier than identical women across generations. Catherine challenged. Crazier than what you saw in those ledgers. Magic doesn't always look like fairy tales, nephew. Sometimes it looks like accounting and construction permits and careful patterns. Another explosion rocked the night. The ground beneath our feet trembled, but not from the blast. Something deeper was stirring. We have 3 hours until true midnight, Catherine said. We need the tools, the journals, and most importantly, blood from all living keepers. Blood magic, I whispered, remembering the small scars on Mama's palms. It was never about keeping power in the family, Catherine explained. It was about keeping the family's power focused on protection. That's why only certain bloodlines can maintain the seal. Sarah touched her mother's pearls. The necklaces. Crystallized blood from the first keepers. Catherine confirmed. Passed down. Added to by each generation. They help us channel the containment energy. James checked his watch. 2 hours. 50 minutes. I looked at my family. My husband, my children, my sister. All the secrets and lies between us had led to this moment. What happens if we fail? I asked Catherine. Her face went pale. Remember the stories Mama told about the night Richmond fell? The mysterious fires. The unexplained disappearances. That wasn't war, I realized. That was a taste of what's coming. She finished. If we don't stop them from breaking that seal completely. The ground shook again. Harder this time. In the distance, strange lights began to dance around the courthouse dome. It was time to end this. Not just for our family but for everyone. The courthouse square was chaos when we arrived. Emergency vehicles cast rotating red and blue lights across the historic buildings, while Phillips and his men worked at the basement entrance, their drilling equipment echoing through the night. Before I share how this ends, make sure you're subscribed. The truth about what happened that night needs to be preserved. We need to reach the rose points, Catherine whispered, passing out Mama's gardening tools, the ceremonial keys. Each keeper takes a position, just like in the garden pattern. I looked at my children. Sarah, David, you take the north and east points. James, coordinate with the real FBI. They need to clear civilians from the area. What about us? Catherine asked. We take the center, together. The ground trembled continuously now. As we moved into position, I saw other women emerging from the shadows, daughters and mothers from the founding families, each wearing pearl necklaces, each carrying tools marked with ancient symbols. Philip spotted us too late. Stop them, he shouted, but a sudden pulse of energy from below knocked his men off their feet. Catherine and I raced for the courthouse steps. The doors were already open, blue light spilling from the basement. We could hear Phillips's men chanting in Latin, trying to break the final seal. Ready? Catherine grabbed my hand. Our blood mingled where Mama's old trowel had cut our palms. Together we began the counter-chant Mama had taught us, disguised as bedtime prayers. Around the square, the other keepers joined in, their voices rising with the wind. The basement seal cracked, but instead of breaking, it began to reshape itself, strengthened by our combined bloodline magic. Philip screamed in rage, firing his weapon, but the bullets dissolved in the growing light. It's not enough, Catherine shouted over the rising wind. We need more power. That's when I felt them, all the keepers who had come before, their strength flowing through the pearl necklaces. Mama's presence was strongest of all, guiding our hands as we completed the ritual. The light imploded, drawing everything inward. Phillips and his men were swept away, not by violence, but by a justice older than law. The courthouse glowed briefly, then settled back to normal, its foundations stronger than ever. In the silence that followed, Catherine hugged me tight. "It's over," she whispered. "Really over." But we both knew that wasn't quite true. The society would need watching, the seals maintaining. Our children and their children would carry this responsibility, but differently now, with truth instead of secrets, protection instead of power. James helped us gather the tools and journals. The FBI, the real FBI, would need careful explanations, filtered versions of the truth. Some mysteries, we decided, were better left in family hands. Sarah and David joined us, their faces reflecting a new understanding of their heritage. The Washington family legacy would continue, but reshaped by their generation's wisdom. Catherine squeezed my hand one last time before turning to leave. "Where will you go?" I asked. She smiled. "Someone needs to watch the other 12 points, but I'll be around, little sister. The roses will let you know when." Later that night, in Mama's garden, I planted a new rose bush, a keeper's rose, marking the start of a new cycle. Its thorns drew a drop of blood from my finger, sealing the promise. Some say power corrupts, but they forget that power can also protect. The real question is what we choose to do with the legacies we inherit. So if you're ever in Georgia and see roses planted in a strange pattern, remember, some gardens grow more than flowers. Some secrets are kept not to hide darkness, but to protect the light. And sometimes the strongest magic isn't in spells or seals, but in the bonds between sisters, mothers, and daughters, passing down wisdom in the language of roses.